Okay, so Bigfoot. It's like everyone's heard the stories, right? Lurking in the woods, huge, hairy, mysterious. It's kind of hard to resist, you know?
It really is.
And for this deep dive, you guys sent in some seriously interesting stuff. Articles, a documentary, even audio analysis. You're not messing around. We're going deep on this one. First-hand accounts, the whole cultural impact, why people are so drawn to this, even without, a ton of hard proof.
Right.
Which, let's be honest, is a big part of the whole thing. It's a fascinating topic, and a really old one, too. Especially in the Pacific Northwest, right? You've got those Native American stories passed down for generations about this large, hairy being living in the forest. It's woven into the history there.
And that's what's so interesting to me. You see these stories, these similar figures all over the world. You've got the Yeti in the Himalayas, the Yowie in Australia. It's like every culture has its own version. Now, the scientific community might be skeptical, but this global phenomenon, this consistency, it kind of makes you wonder if there's something deeper going on.
Right. Okay, so let's jump into some of those firsthand accounts. That YouTube documentary you sent, it's full of them. And the thing that really gets me is how, emotional these encounters are. We're talking fear, awe, wonder, even a kind of grief afterwards. Heavy stuff.
Yeah.
Like there's this one logger, ex-military, used to analyzing complex systems. Not exactly the type to just see things, right?
Right.
But he describes seeing three figures, the biggest maybe 9 feet tall, swinging their arms. And he says the image is like burned into his memory. Or take this camper who woke up to their tent being pushed in, felt this huge hand on the back of their neck. They even grabbed their car keys to set off the car alarm, hoping it'd scare whatever it was away. Talk about thinking on your feet.
Oh, what?
And then there are these grandparents who are hiking and saw this figure just booking it up this steep mountainside, like faster than I could run down it, they said. They were in disbelief. And afterward, this weird solemn feeling stuck with them.
It's tempting to just dismiss those as tall tales or mistakes, but
Yeah.
you can't deny how sincere a lot of these people are. And some of the details, like that speed and agility, they go way beyond what we know humans can do, even at our peak.
Right, like even the best athletes, there's a limit.
Exactly. And we have to remember, the human mind is incredibly complex.
Yeah.
We have those defense mechanisms, rationalization, suppression, even repression. It's how we cope with really intense experiences. Sometimes we don't remember things perfectly, or we only recall them under hypnosis, things like that.
So are you saying these are just like tricks of the mind then?
Not necessarily. It just adds a layer of, complexity. Think about it, if these creatures are real and they're living in such remote areas, finding physical remains, that's going to be incredibly difficult. Organic matter breaks down quickly in the wilderness.
Yeah, makes sense.
One source even mentioned a small plane crash took a year to find in that kind of terrain. So no bones doesn't automatically mean no Bigfoot.
Okay, yeah. It's like trying to find a needle in a haystack, but the haystack is huge and constantly changing. But what about other types of clues? Stuff beyond just these, like, fleeting sightings. We're talking strange structures, weird sounds, things that make you go, what was that?
Right.
The documentary goes into this, and honestly, it's kind of hard not to get drawn in. They talk about these massive nests woven from tree branches, like seriously intricate. You'd think they needed opposable thumbs to build them. And get this, they didn't just push debris aside like an animal would. It was deliberate, like they were constructing something specific. Then there are these tree structures, all lined up perfectly, pointing due north, like they're markers leading to something important. Oh, and it gets weirder. There's this audio analysis done by a Navy cryptolinguist, so someone who is basically a pro at patterns and communication. They describe these recorded sounds as like a language with sounds humans physically can't make.
Wow.
I know, right? And how about this one? Imagine you're working the graveyard shift at a water treatment plant. It's late, you're probably a little creeped out anyway. And then you see these massive handprints appear on the window, complete with hair impressions.
Oh, see, now that would freak me out.
Right.
Yeah.
So how do you even begin to make sense of that?
Well, that's where things get really tricky. Because interpreting this kind of evidence is so subjective. Are those structures signs of intelligence or just natural formations that we're giving meaning to? Are those sounds a real language? Or just, animal calls distorted by the wind, the trees, whatever?
Those handprints, a hoax, someone messing around.
Exactly. It's tempting to want those clear-cut answers. But the truth is, a lot of this evidence is open to interpretation. It could be misidentified animals, elaborate hoaxes, or signs of something we just don't understand yet. And that's what keeps people coming back for more, right? That mystery.
Oh, totally. Okay, so let's shift gears a bit. Even if we can't definitively say, yep, Bigfoot's real, it still doesn't explain the huge impact these encounters have on people. Like you were saying before, there's something deeper going on there.
Right.
Almost every story in that documentary talks about this kind of emotional fallout. Like, you have these tough outdoorsmen, grown men brought to tears by what they saw, unable to go back into the woods. Others feel like they're going crazy, so disturbed that they try to bury the memory altogether.
Yeah, it can be really unsettling.
There's this one quote from a psychologist in the film that really stuck with me. He says, "People like to control their world. Something outside that some will reject, sometimes in a militant manner, degrading those who had the experience." It's kind of a lot to unpack.
It is, and it just shows how powerful belief is and how uncomfortable we are with things that challenge our worldview. Humans are hardwired to find patterns, to seek explanations. When faced with ambiguity, we crave resolution, even if it means rejecting something that doesn't fit into our neat little boxes.
So we'd rather deny something exists than, like, rethink what we thought we knew.
In a way, yeah. And that's where I think this whole Bigfoot thing gets really interesting, because it defies easy categorization. It represents the unknown, the wild, untamed aspects of our world, and maybe even ourselves. There's a thrill in considering that something could exist beyond our current understanding, something that makes us question our place in the grand scheme of things.
It's almost as if Bigfoot is this mirror reflecting our own fears and this fascination with the unknown right back at us.
Exactly. And let's say hypothetically Bigfoot is real. Think about the implications for science. A new primate species, potentially a missing link in human evolution right under our noses. It would be a paradigm shift.
It's like easier to dismiss it than to deal with how much it could change things. There's this one theory in the documentary, though, that really caught my attention. It suggests that maybe Bigfoot isn't just a creature of the woods, but something more. Something we only see, like, glimpses of during altered states of consciousness.
Oh, wow. Now that is a fascinating concept. It makes you wonder, what else are we missing in those moments when our perception shifts? When the line between what we think is real and what's possible starts to blur? Maybe the answer is even more mind-blowing than the creature itself.
And we're back to our deep dive on Bigfoot. So before we went down that rabbit hole of consciousness and stuff, we were talking about that Patterson-Gimlin film, you know, the one from like 67.
Ah, yeah, the classic.
The Bigfoot footage, right?
It is grainy, shaky, but still, it sparked debate for, what, over 50 years?
Exactly. So for those who haven't seen it, what's the deal?
Basically, it's this short clip, shows a large, hairy figure kind of striding across a clearing. Problem is, the footage is so rough, it's really hard to tell what you're looking at.
Hence all the arguments.
Oh yeah. Some people are convinced it's just a guy in a suit, a hoax. Others, they say there's no way you could fake something that realistic back then.
It's like become this whole legendary thing in itself. So what's the latest? Has anyone definitively figured out if it's real or not?
You'd think with all our technology now, we'd know for sure. But nope. It's been analyzed to death, frame by frame, computer models, even trying to track down the supposed suit maker. Still no conclusive answer.
So it's still a big question mark.
Pretty much. And I think that's part of why it remains so fascinating. It's this unsolved mystery that everyone has an opinion on. It's like a Bigfoot Rorschach test. You see what you want to see.
It definitely makes you think, even if we never know for sure, what's the harm in a little mystery?
Exactly. It keeps things interesting. And besides, the search for answers, the journey, that's often more rewarding than the answer itself.
Speaking of journeys, let's go back to those altered states of consciousness for a bit. Earlier, you mentioned they often come up not just with Bigfoot sightings, but with other, let's say, paranormal experiences too. Is there a connection there?
It's definitely an area that raises more questions than answers.
Yeah.
Our understanding is still evolving, but there are some interesting theories out there trying to explain the link.
Like what? Give me some examples.
Well, some researchers believe that in these altered states, our brains might be able to tap into other dimensions or realms of existence that are usually inaccessible to us.
Okay, that's getting pretty out there, even for me.
It is pretty wild. And then there's the idea that maybe during these states, our inhibitions are lowered, so we might be more susceptible to suggestion or more likely to misinterpret what we're sensing.
So it's not that the paranormal is more real in those moments, but that we're more likely to believe it's real because of how our brains are functioning.
Exactly. It's like our filters are down and we're more open to experiencing things outside our normal perception.
That actually makes a lot of sense.
Another theory is that certain brainwave activity during these altered states might actually create electromagnetic fields, and those fields could interact with the environment, maybe even cause some of these paranormal phenomena.
Wait, so you're saying our brains could be acting like, what, antennas? Tuning into frequencies we're usually not aware of?
Exactly. It's a pretty mind-blowing concept. And there's actually been some research looking into this. For example, some studies show a correlation between paranormal reports and geomagnetic storms.
But like with the Earth's magnetic field, seriously.
Yeah. It might sound far-fetched, but it makes you wonder, right? And then there's the whole idea of paranormal hotspots. Certain locations believed to have unique electromagnetic properties that could amplify these occurrences.
Okay, we are really down the rabbit hole now.
We are. But that's part of what makes this all so fascinating, right? It challenges us to question what we think we know and consider possibilities that we might not have otherwise.
So after all this, the evidence, the stories, the theories, what are your big takeaways? What can we learn from the Bigfoot phenomenon, even if we never find that undeniable, concrete proof?
Well, for one, I think it teaches us humility. We don't have all the answers, and that's okay. There are things in this world that we may never fully understand, and that's part of the beauty of it.
And even with all our technology, all our progress, there's still a sense of wonder, of mystery out there. It's kind of humbling.
Exactly. It reminds us that there are still things that can surprise us, challenge our understanding. And that's a good thing. It keeps us curious, keeps us searching.
Speaking of searching, let's shift gears a bit and talk about the human side of all this. We've delved into the evidence, the theories, but what about the people who claim to have encountered Bigfoot? What are those experiences like, and how do they impact their lives? So we're back, diving into the human side of this whole Bigfoot thing. We've talked evidence, we've talked theories, but what about the people who say they've actually had these encounters? What are those experiences really like?
Yeah, that's the heart of it all, isn't it? These encounters, they're often deeply personal, and they can be incredibly powerful. People describe this whole range of emotions: fear, awe, a sense of connection, even a kind of spiritual shift.
So it's not just like, oh, I saw something weird in the woods. It's more profound than that.
Oh, way more. For a lot of people, it's validating. Like, they're not alone in believing this. They find these whole communities of people who've had similar experiences, who get it.
And that community can be super important, right? Especially if you've dealt with people dismissing you, making fun of you for even thinking Bigfoot might be real.
100%. The Bigfoot community, it offers this sense of belonging, a safe place to share those experiences without judgment.
It's not always easy though, right? There's still a stigma around believing in Bigfoot, and those who come forward with their stories, they often face a lot of, well, negativity, skepticism, ridicule, even harassment in some cases.
Sadly, yeah, that's true. We as a society can be so quick to dismiss anything that falls outside those accepted norms, those scientific boxes we like to put things in.
Right.
And the people who dare to speak up about these things, to say, hey, I saw something you might not believe in, they risk a lot. Being ostracized, judged, even hurting their careers. It takes guts.
It really does, which is why I think it's so important to at least listen with an open mind, you know?
Yeah.
Respect those experiences, even if you don't necessarily share the belief.
Absolutely. It's about empathy, recognizing that there are so many different ways of experiencing the world, and hey, who are we to say for sure what's out there and what isn't?
Right, like our knowledge is limited, even with all the science in the world.
Exactly. We got to be open to the idea that maybe, just maybe, there are things in this universe that we don't understand yet. Things we can't even imagine.
So for those who have those close encounters, are there any common threads, anything that seems to run through a lot of their stories? Like, what are they actually describing? Well, there are definitely some recurring themes in the descriptions. People often talk about this large, hairy creature walking upright, very muscular with a distinct, often unpleasant smell. And the size estimates, they vary, but many put it at like 7 to 10 feet tall.
Whoa, that's like way bigger than any primate we know about.
Right. It makes you wonder, and some reports even suggest that Bigfoot might be pretty intelligent, like mimicking human sounds, using tools, maybe even communicating in some basic ways.
Which takes us back to those audio recordings, right? Analyzed by that Navy crypto-linguist.
Yeah.
The ones they said sounded like a language, with those sounds that humans just can't physically make.
Exactly. And there are actually researchers out there who are fully dedicated to studying those Bigfoot vocalizations, trying to find those patterns, decode them, maybe even have a conversation one day.
Wow. It's like trying to crack this ancient code, Imagine what we could learn if we could understand those sounds, what they mean.
It would be incredible. But of course, we can't talk about this without addressing the elephant, or should I say, Bigfoot, in the room. And that's the lack of hard physical evidence. The skeptics love to point that out. No bodies, no DNA samples. So how do we reconcile that with all these stories, all these firsthand accounts?
Right. Well, as we've touched on before, there are a few possible explanations. Organic matter decomposes incredibly fast in the wilderness. Plus, some people believe that Bigfoot could be interdimensional, only briefly interacting with our reality.
Right, right. And we can't forget about those good old-fashioned government conspiracy theories, the whole they're covering it up angle.
Oh, absolutely. It wouldn't be a true mystery without a good conspiracy theory or two.
Exactly. And it makes you think, though, right? What if, hypothetically, it was all true? Bigfoot is real. What kind of impact would that have on society, on our understanding of, well, everything?
Oh man, it would be massive. I mean, we'd have to completely rethink our place in the natural world. Our understanding of evolution, biology, even history, it would all be up for grabs. And you know what? It wouldn't be easy. There'd be fear, confusion, maybe even panic. But it could also be this incredible opportunity to grow, to learn, and evolve as a species.
Right. It's like easier to just say it's not real than to deal with that kind of upheaval.
100%. But it's a conversation worth having, don't you think?
Absolutely. So let's go there. Let's say, for argument's sake, Bigfoot is real. What are the ethical implications? How do we, as humans, treat this species that's both so similar and yet so different?
That's the million-dollar question. And it's something we should be thinking about right now, not waiting until it's too late. Because if it's real, Bigfoot is most likely an endangered species.
Yeah.
And we, as the self-proclaimed caretakers of this planet, we have a huge responsibility here. We can't just go out hunting for it, trying to capture it for study.
Right. It's got to be about more than just satisfying our curiosity.
Exactly. We have to approach this with the utmost respect, with caution, understanding that Bigfoot has just as much right to exist as we do.
So where do we go from here? What's the best way to balance that curiosity, that desire to know, with the need to protect these creatures, assuming they're out there?
Well, it's definitely a tricky situation, no easy answers. But I think education is key. People need to learn about Bigfoot, its history, its potential behavior, the importance of respecting its habitat, all of it.
And we have to encourage responsible research
done
by qualified scientists, people who are committed to those ethical practices.
Yes, 100%. And we can't forget about engaging with those indigenous communities who have been living alongside these creatures, potentially for centuries. They have so much knowledge to share, a deep understanding we can learn from.
It's about taking this multifaceted approach, combining the best of science with respect for cultural perspectives, and always, always prioritizing those ethical considerations.
Exactly. Open minds, challenging our assumptions, embracing the mystery. That's how we move forward.
Well said. We've covered so much ground in this deep dive. It's amazing. The history, the evidence, the culture, the psychology, even the mind-bending stuff like interdimensionality. It really is. But it just goes to show you the power of the unknown, right? This idea of Bigfoot, it captures our imaginations, makes us question what we think we know about the world, about ourselves.
Totally.
And even without those definitive answers, just exploring these possibilities, it's been incredible. Eye-opening, even.
It's a good reminder that there's still so much out there to discover. So many mysteries left to uncover.
Yeah.
And that's exciting.
It really is. So to everyone listening, whether you're a diehard believer, a total skeptic, or somewhere in between, just remember to keep an open mind, stay curious, and never stop exploring the world around you. Who knows what you might find?
Couldn't have said it better myself.
That's our show for today. We'll see you next time for another deep dive.